this is Dennis and Jen again, and we're excited to talk to you this week about the idea of vision for your marriage. And leading up to this talk, you probably had some conversations in the homework about what your hopes were for a year in, 5 years in, and et cetera. And we thought we'd start by sharing with you a little bit about what our 5-year plan looked like when we started.
So I shared with you guys that I'm a planner. So I work at P&G, type A, perfect personality like that, where I like to have my lists and check things off. So creating a 5-year plan was something that definitely was already done by the time we were sitting in your seats. But one of the things about the 5-year plan is that from a car perspective, and this was even like 10 and further out, I told Dennis that I drove a minivan when I first started driving. Served me well. It was a 95 Nissan Quest. His name was Petey the Pimpin' Red Van. But I basically, I did my time with a minivan and I was never going to do that again. And so I said, I've never owned a new car, and just based off of like the fact that we're making money and I wanted to own a Mini Cooper, specifically a sky blue one.
That's right. So new car was going to be a Mini Cooper. We mentioned in our last talk that we had done long distance for most of our dating relationship. And so we thought, when we get married, we want a solid 5 years before we start thinking about having kids. So we wanted kids at some point, but we wanted a good 5 years just to enjoy each other and not really worry about kids.
We should put a line through the kids since they weren't on the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Similarly or related, we bought a house right before we got married, but the house itself was not really, it's not your family house. It was our starter home, and it was too small. And so we said that there's no way that in 5 years, if we're thinking about having a family, that we would still be in that house. In fact, the day that I got pregnant, if not happened already, we would put that house on the market.
Yep. And then finally, Jen mentioned at the beginning, we were both in pretty high-flying careers. And so the idea for our work lives was to climb the corporate ladder. We were a big company and had kind of that promotion and the next promotion and the next promotion all laid out in front of us. And the idea was to climb that ladder as fast as we could. So that was the 5-year plan, and it felt pretty clear. But then jump ahead 5 years to where we actually landed and talk about how we did on that 5-year plan.
So I drive a minivan.
The reason?
The reason for that minivan is
that we wound up having 2 kids by the time we hit 5 years because we kind of got a couple of years in and realized that our wants had changed around that, and what we were hoping for had changed.
And we actually were parking that minivan in the garage of our original house.
That's right. So still in the dinky little starter home with not nearly enough space for baby toys. And I had actually made a career change going from the large corporate life and jumped into the startup world and kind of was living a radically different life that didn't really have a promotion path to it and didn't have certainty to it. And all of these things were just very much off plan for where we thought we were going to be. But I think the great thing about it is while those things were off of our plan, they were actually very well in line with the vision for our marriage. And that's the big point that we want you guys to take away today, is that your plan for your marriage, plans aren't a bad thing, but that's very different than your vision for your marriage.
Yeah, if you think about it, there's a couple of things that are just true about plans. Plans can only go as far as what you can imagine. And so that means that it's actually pretty hard to imagine what your life is going to look like in 25 years because we don't even know what the world's going to look like in 25 years. So plans are limited. Plans tend to have specific things that you want to check off. So it's something that you can achieve. They're not very open-ended. And to people who are type A, that might feel very comforting, but in fact, that's actually pretty limiting. And plans are often very focused in terms of like the world that we live in right now. So they have to do with achieving things and possessions, or it's just very based off of your circumstances right now, which it can help you move forward, but oftentimes a vision is much bigger and grander.
And if you've been around Crossroads for a length of time, you've probably heard Brian speak about this. And this is a quote from him. He says, "Vision isn't planning. Vision is a future dream that's going to take faith and sacrifice. Planning is simply an allocation of resources. Live the difficult dream of going after a vision." And I think this speaks to while plans can help tell you where to put your resources, the vision is going to guide the higher direction in a way that is much more sustainable and much more empowering for you as a couple, as we'll get into.
Mhm.
So we thought we would go from that to sharing a little bit of what our family vision looks like. And we come from marketing world, business world, and ours looks a little bit more nerdy on that front than others might. We actually created a marriage equity pyramid.
Which I will pause and say you can go into your booklet and look on page 6 and see some not dorky examples of this, if this is totally going to freak you out, but we're going to help explain a little bit about what we're going to show you in our vision so that you're not totally confused.
Yeah, and I think it's really good that there's a range. Like, your vision does not have to look even like ours or like what you see in the book. Your vision can look like what means the most to you. It should drive clarity in the things that we talk about here, though.
And your marriage vision is going to evolve over time as well. So this is kind of the iteration that we have right now, and when we go through it, we'll explain how we got there. But our vision when we were sitting in your seat had a lot of the same flavor, but looked different. And I am sure that our vision in 10 years is going to have some nuances that we didn't even think of just yet.
Yeah. So nerdy equity pyramid vision. What is an equity pyramid? At the very top of the pyramid is the why. And that is just your reason for existing. It's your core mission that is what you're all about. Underneath that and supporting that is your how. And this is the personality with which you pursue that why. This is the way you would be described if someone was talking about you. Next up is the what, and the what is the kinds of things that you do. These start to get towards the specific examples, but the examples are actually separate under that. And that's because, you can name a couple specific things that you do right now, but there should be themes that can change over time. So let's say your what is, or your specific example is traveling and a quarantine hits. Well, that specific example doesn't work anymore. So what's the what behind that example? So then this is what ours looks like specifically.
So our why, the whole reason in terms of why we want to exist, is together, Dennis and I want to build the kingdom. And so really that is the compass with which we are looking through everything is this building the kingdom. Our how is we do that through strength, bravery, and kindness. And the brevity here actually is driven by the fact that we have 2 young kids. And so we actually have been trying to teach Luke and Milo that they are strong, they are brave, and they are kind. We tell them that every night. We do these affirmations where we say, I am strong, and they repeat it back. So these are things that we talk about in terms of how we are going to build the kingdom. In terms of the what, the things that we do, we share, we have adventures together, we encourage, and we solve problems. So you will often hear Dennis or I say, if you're ever around us with our kids, if they come up to us with some sort of a problem, we say, you can do it, you're a problem solver. And there we are encouraging and telling them that they are problem solvers. And then some of these specific examples that feed into our what is taking photos. That's something that I like to do. I do it for other people, so that's sharing. I do it when we have adventures. Traveling is having adventures and seeing the world, and it often causes us to solve problems when we go people we haven't been today. Games are a way for us to spend time together, learning how to solve problems, encouraging other people. We really like cooperative board games. I would highly recommend, if you are a competitive couple, to actually look into cooperative board games.
Yeah, that's actually smart.
And then finally, relationship with community, and that kind of feeds into all of those. Those are just things that everybody probably enjoys, but those are the specific flavor of things that we have found that when they are in our life, we are happier and just kind of better for it.
Yeah. So that's what our marriage vision looks like right now. And like Jen said, that's evolved over time, but the core thrust of it and the God-led nature of it has stayed very consistent. So what does a vision like this do for you, and what does has our vision done for us? What back up? So when you think about our 5-year plan report card, we were off. But if you think about our vision for 5 years, the elements that had come into our life, even though they were unexpected, were actually very well in line with our vision.
So if you think about like a vision specifically is much better to be thought of as a compass versus a report card. And I think that that's where you can get tripped up if you are thinking about your marriage plan versus your marriage vision. Very much all of those things that we got X's for and we kind of had an F were actually things that have brought a lot of joy into our life. And I'm very happy that we did a really terrible job with our plan. I think part of what worked really well for us is because we have put God and building the kingdom so far forward in our vision, we've been able to use his guidance to bring us to things that were even outside of what we could have imagined.
Yeah, way better than we could have planned for. All right, so what has having a strong vision done for us, and what can having a strong vision do for you? We think there's 5 key elements that a strong vision will bring to you.
So first and foremost, vision is a way for you to have clarity in your marriage. Dennis and I have been married for 8.5 years, and I can count on maybe one hand where we've had a really hard decision to make in a time of peace where we can talk about it and neither of us are stressed out, and it just doesn't happen that way. It's kind of, I don't know, just the rule of life that when it rains, it pours. And so you might be changing jobs and moving at the same time. And then suddenly you have to decide if you can, I don't know, afford a second mortgage or something along those lines. And it's not all rain clouds all the time, but when there are big decisions to make, it helps for you to have a rubric that you can judge if that decision is something that's in line with your vision or not. And it's not going to make any sort of hardships in life go away, but it is going to give you clarity on the best path forward for you as a couple.
Yeah. Second up, vision generates energy and passion. You guys are in before the honeymoon stage even, so it's fun to just, you're all lovey-dovey and all of each other right now. But after a certain amount of time, if you are completely inwardly focused as a couple and stagnant and not moving, that can wear. And the best way to generate new energy or passion is to have something outside of yourselves that you're moving towards together. And that's what a vision does, is it makes you move together, it breaks up stagnation, and it creates this kind of newness and excitement that fuels energy and passion in your marriage.
Yeah. The third thing that it does is it sustains purity. And so the world is really loud and full of opinions. If you look at the divorce rate in the world, it's not really that positive. But God is a really big fan of marriage, and he wants people to stay married. And so I would rather listen to God in terms of what he wants for my marriage than listening to the world, because a lot of times there's bad advice out there. And so what the world tells you that you want or you need next isn't necessarily the best thing. So by having a vision, it allows you to be sure you're making choices in the right way. Honestly, if I go back to our plan with this, we're in a starter home and we need to get to the better house, like that was totally a worldly thing. It was, I need to be in a certain size house to prove that I'm at the right level and have all the Instagram worthy stuff. And it was just not the right financial choice for us. And it wasn't the right time for us to move. So by having that purity in terms of being able to understand, we were able to make the right choice there.
Mm-hmm. Next up is unity. A strong vision promotes unity. And particularly when you have conflict, and that's something we're talking about in Building Blocks for Marriage as well. But a strong vision gets you out of the winner and loser mindset. It gets you out of, I either get my way or she gets hers or vice versa. And it puts the criteria and the goals above you, hopefully towards God. And that unifies you as you are moving towards the same thing. Even if you're starting from different places, you'll get closer. And so having a strong vision and a clear direction of where you're going brings you closer together and keeps you as one.
And the final thing is that it promotes victory, and victory is just kind of a sense of celebration and accomplishment. I mentioned that your vision is going to change over time, but by having a vision and something that we can come back to, Dennis and I actually will use our anniversary as a time where we can kind of reflect on everything that has happened throughout the years. And just kind of like the point I made on clarity, where you never make a decision in kind of a time of peace. I think it's without having any sort of goal, you can look back at those decisions that you've made, or look back at how you have weathered some of those storms, and feel a sense of accomplishment. It gives you almost a goal or something that you're striving towards that you can actually celebrate together. And it's a celebration that you can continually have throughout your marriage. It's not just a finish line, it's kind of a continual thing.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to jump into the Bible a bit. So if you go to Proverbs 16:19, it says, "In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." And this goes back to a point that I made a bit earlier, which is you can plan the direction that you want to go. But if you are meticulously trying to be your own human GPS, you'll probably end up in the wrong spot. Whereas if you actually create a vision and say, I want to go roughly towards this direction, God is going to be able to bring you opportunities and give you the right steps. He's the better GPS in this instance. So instead of trying to have check boxes, let the Lord kind of guide the way that you're going, and know that the destination you're ending up in is much better than anything that you could have chartered from where you started with a plan.
Yeah, I mean, God speaks directly to that. He says, I know the vision I have for you, a vision to prosper you and not to harm you, a vision to give you hope and a future. Like he has this vision. He wants to share it for you. He wants you guys pursuing it. And it is so much better than what you can plan for yourself. One of the things I love about this verse here in Jeremiah 29:11 is that this actually comes right after God told the Israelites they were going to have to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. So you want to talk about a change in plans. Here they've been striving towards the promised land for so long, and they get there, and then God sends them in a different direction. And this is what he says to comfort them. This is what he tells them about how his vision might be greater than their plan. And God has that same thing for you as a couple. And you know, following that is going to bring you to much better places overall than you can envision for yourself. So a couple examples of how that has specifically come to life for us, and stories from our past several years.
So we've shared a little bit about our work history. I specifically work at Procter & Gamble, and some of the work that I do is work that is actually predominantly done in lots of fun cities that I would actually like to live in, namely the West Coast or New York. And so we've kind of joked that we could move at any point and probably make a whole lot more money. But we had said in our vision that community is important, and our family is in Cincinnati. And so that's just a choice that we've made. And so it's actually been a little bit of a non-conflict for us, because we had that vision so clearly set out that I have daydreamed at times and said, Dennis, like, wouldn't it be kind of fun if we went and lived in California? And he says, yeah, but we want to be in community. And so it kind of, it makes me understand that, oh yeah, like this is the thing that we had decided to do together, and we want to live in this city. And so it's not like neither of us are angsting for other things. And so it's kind of put work in the right spot for us in terms of where it should be, in terms of the things that are important. And I've unfortunately seen the other side of this, where people have chased more money or chased job opportunities, and then work becomes the focus, because that's why they're making decisions. And it's just ended up in a lot of unhappiness that I think could be prevented.
Yeah, it also helps on this one that Cincinnati has kind of blown up in the last 5 years. Like, 5 years ago, everyone's like, why are you staying in Cincinnati? And now everyone's like, oh, Cincinnati's showing up on all these lists of cool places
that you can afford to live in.
Yeah. Another story is, you see obviously me and Jen in this picture, and the third person is Binod. And Binod is an immigrant from Nepal. He came actually to New York at first, and had some people who were supposed to be helping him kind of con him, was about to go back to Nepal, had lost all his money. And through just these random connections, Crossroads was a part of it. And then God just put the right people in the right room at the right time.
To be clear, we were going to a Bible study where I think the prompt had something to do with like if you needed to donate money or what resources you have.
Yeah, what are your resources?
In the car on the way to the Bible study, Dennis goes, I think I'd be interested in hosting someone at some point, like a college couple or something like that. Like that could be interesting. And so sitting in the Bible study, we shared, oh, we think we could maybe have a room at some point. This is just like a Bible study of what's in your heart sort of thing. And sitting right next to us, the guy turns and goes, what about a guy from Nepal?
Yeah.
And I think my exact reaction was, that's highly specific.
Yeah. And so instead of having to go across the sea back home, which would have been, he didn't have the resources to get back over, he came to Cincinnati, and we actually offered up our guest bedroom, and he lived with us for 6 months. And not only did he live with us, but we found out just an honest mistake in translation and in communication. His wife and child had a visa as well that was going to expire. And if they didn't come over quickly, they were just not going to be able to join him. And so we wound up with a family of 3 living with us for 6 months. And it was crazy. It was way outside our comfort zone.
It was hard.
Yeah, it was absolutely hard. But man, like the clarity in that meeting to be like, okay, that's a very specific opportunity. Is that in line with our vision? Yes. Okay. That means we say yes. And it was just a no-brainer. Again, even though it was scary, even though it was hard, we had that clarity. We got to get outside of ourselves. This is with young kids, having them exposed to a different culture, and kind of seeing us live out our mission was huge and generated a ton of energy and passion for us. And then promoting unity, one between us, like it was a huge time of togetherness for us, but being able to literally enable a family to be together that wouldn't have otherwise. And they're still here in Cincinnati. They're doing amazing. Got their own apartment, which we were super excited about.
We had friends who donated a car, and
yeah.
what's really awesome is we will see on Facebook they post like really cool stylized pictures of them in front of this like 95 Ford Taurus and post, but they're living the American dream.
They really are, yeah.
So, I mean, like it was less than a year in and he was able to have a roof over his family's head and be providing for them. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah. So, again, nothing we could have ever expected, but because we had a clear vision and we saw an opportunity that lined up with it, we were able to really take advantage of that.
And then finally is talking about our anniversaries. So we actually, one of the things that didn't make, I guess, our pyramid is themes. You give me a good theme and I really like to plan and creatively celebrate around it. So you may or may not know that there are actually traditional gifts for each of your wedding anniversaries. And so Dennis and I have pretty much always taken a trip, except for when I had just very recently had a baby, but the trip has had something to do with whatever the theme is. So our very first year, paper is the first theme. We actually went out to Washington State and saw Dave Matthews perform at the Gorge, which is really awesome, but we bought the poster the night that the concert happened, and that's something that's actually hanging in our room, so that's very special. And every year on our anniversary, I think that the interesting thing about like how these trips happen is it's something we both get excited about. Well, I get excited and Dennis probably agrees to get excited with me.
Depending on the place, it's been awesome.
We did just go to Greece, so
got excited about that one.
But that was as we were planning it, it literally was, hey Dennis, year 8 is bronze. Where do you think we could go? And we looked up the oldest bronze statue, the biggest bronze statue, both of which were in China, which we didn't want to go to. And then we landed on the bronze era, or bronze age, which is in Greece, which we could definitely get behind. But it's something that we can do together. It's a trip that we do without the kids, and it's time that we can kind of be unified overall. And then it's just a time where we can really, just celebrate what we've accomplished. It's a good way for us to celebrate each other and kind of plan for the upcoming year. So those have been really awesome.
Yeah, in this case, this is an example of where your vision gives you permission to just, not feel guilty about doing something that otherwise you might, or, gives you permission to just really enjoy and revel in something fun and delightful. That can be a part of your vision as well. And that should be a part of your vision.
God's okay with you having fun.
Oh yeah. So that's us. That's our vision and how it's come to life for us in a couple different ways. That's just skimming the surface. There's a ton of other stories. But what you guys are going to do after this talk is start to consider God's vision for your marriage. And there's an exercise on page 4 of your book that'll get you started on this. Again, every vision is going to look a little bit different, but this as a tool to get you started is really good.
So your homework is to start on the exercise that Dennis talked about on page 4, which gives you a bunch of different areas to consider. And not all of them have to actually make your vision. They didn't make ours, which will become obvious as you go through it. But as a couple, you should discuss what you wrote in the exercise, and then draft a version of your vision. That was just too much of a tongue twister, to share with your group when you come together. So that's your homework. It's not going to be perfect. It might be a couple of sentences. You could cheat and do a pyramid like maybe some other people did. You could write a haiku if you were feeling so inspired, but get something down on paper, because honestly, that's the hardest thing to do, is to get it started. And once you have something, rewriting and editing and changing will help. And honestly, it's something that you probably need to prayerfully consider over time. But we just highly encourage you to have one of those for your marriage and come back to it a lot.
And that's vision for your marriage.